I remember the day she walked out with our children, each of them clutching a small backpack, their confused eyes darting between us as she promised them a bigger and better life. My ex-wife, once so full of laughter and warmth, stood in the doorway with a triumphant glint in her eye, telling me she'd finally found a man worthy of her ambitions. He was rich, she said, a real man who could offer our kids the world. And off they went, piling into his glossy black SUV, leaving me on the porch in a storm of shock and heartbreak. I never thought it could end so coldly, nor that in just a few weeks her entire fantasy would collapse into homelessness. 4 days after they left, I wandered our modest house like a ghost, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant echo of children's laughter that no longer filled these rooms. I couldn't tell whether I felt more rage or sorrow. My ex, Alyssa, had always been ambitious, but I never pegged her as someone who'd uproot the kids for a chance at luxury. I kept replaying her parting words, "They deserve better than this," as though our simple life was a punishment she couldn't bear any longer. We'd met in college, both of us brimming with naive hopes. She studied marketing, I studied history. We fell in love over late-night coffees and library corners, where we whispered about building a future as partners. Over time, though, her hunger for more status, more wealth, more everything, dwarfed my simpler dreams. I was content with a comfortable home, a steady job teaching high school, and the warmth of family dinners. She, on the other hand, yearned for the kind of world she saw in glossy magazines: designer clothes, exclusive events, the clink of champagne glasses. For years I tried to ignore the widening gap in our values. But the day she left, it stared me in the face. She found her solution in Marcus, a millionaire property developer with a love for flaunting his success. Pictures of his sprawling mansion dotted social media: lush gardens, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. Alyssa latched onto him like a lifeline to the world she believed she deserved. And so, she took our kids, proclaiming that they would finally have the bright future I apparently couldn't provide. It stung deeper than any insult she could have hurled. In the wake of their departure, I spent evenings alone on the couch, staring blankly at cartoons that once lulled my children to sleep. My phone stayed silent, no calls from my kids, no updates from Alyssa. The lack of contact shredded me. I tried calling and texting, but the few responses I got were curt, dismissive. "They're fine," she'd write. "Marcus is wonderful with them." The undertone was always the same: "We're better off." Still, I worried. My daughter Emily was only 7, shy and prone to nightmares if she slept anywhere unfamiliar. My son Liam was 10, rebellious and protective of his sister. How were they adjusting to a new environment, especially one so dramatically different from our old life? I pictured them awed by the mansion's grandeur but perhaps missing their father's easy humor, or the bedtime stories I read each night. Maybe that was just wishful thinking. Maybe they were thriving as Alyssa claimed. That possibility alone tormented me. At work, I tried to maintain a mask of normalcy. My students noticed my subdued manner, but I deflected their curiosity with forced smiles. Teaching world history became my only reprieve from the swirling chaos in my personal life. When the final bell rang, though, reality crashed back in. I'd drive home to an empty house that felt more like a crypt each passing day. The kids' drawings still adorned the fridge, stick figures, bright suns, hearts proclaiming, "Dad, we love you." I considered taking them down, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. They were my reminders that once we were a family. Weeks slipped by in a haze. I contacted a lawyer, hoping to get clarity on custody arrangements, but the process was slow, tangled in legal formalities. Part of me dreaded a prolonged battle, though I vowed not to abandon my rights as a father. At least not without a fight. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, half expecting a telemarketer, but instead, a panicked voice crackled through the line. "Tom, it's me, Alyssa." My heart stuttered. She rarely called these days, content to shoot me dismissive texts. "Alyssa?" I said, confusion and concern warping my tone. Her breath hitched, voice shaky. I need you to pick up the kids." A swirl of emotions churned in me: relief at hearing her mention the kids, anger at her nerve, concern for what had gone wrong. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. She exhaled raggedly as if fighting back tears. "Marcus, we broke up. He asked us to leave the mansion. I have nowhere to go right now. The kids." Her words tumbled over themselves in a jumbled rush. My mind spun. Just weeks ago, she was bragging about the life she'd found with her wealthy lover. Now, in a blink, she was homeless? A spark of vindication flared, like some cosmic retribution, but it was doused by the realization that my kids might be in distress. "Where are you?" I managed to ask, forcing my voice to remain calm. Alyssa gave me an address near a truck stop on the outskirts of town. My stomach twisted at the idea of her, and more importantly, our children, waiting in such a desolate place. Despite the hurt, a paternal instinct surged, compelling me to help. I wrote down the details, told her I'd come. When I hung up, I stared at the phone, heart racing. So this was it. Her grand pursuit of wealth ended in a heartbreak that spat her out onto the curb. But what about the kids? I scooped up my car keys, adrenaline fueling me as I rushed to the car. Anger buzzed under my skin. She had uprooted their lives, taken them away from the security of home, all for a man who apparently cast them aside once the novelty wore off. The thought made my chest tighten with rage. But keep it together, I reminded myself. The kids need stability now, not your anger. A bleak reunion. The truck stop was a grim scene. Rows of semis parked haphazardly, harsh fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows. I spotted Alyssa's figure near an unlit side of the lot, two small shapes huddled against her. My heart lurched as I pulled up. Emily and Liam clung to her legs, looking tired and anxious. I hopped out of the car, my frustration evaporating at the sight of them. Emily rushed forward, tears glistening in her big eyes, and I scooped her into my arms, hugging her so tight she squeaked in protest. Liam hung back a moment, eyes flicking uncertainly between me and his mother, then trudged over, letting me ruffle his hair. "You okay, buddy?" I asked gently, voice tight with emotion. He shrugged, lips pressed together. "I guess," he muttered, glancing at his mother with an unreadable expression. I remembered his rebellious streak, but this wasn't a typical case of attitude. He was confused, maybe angry at the situation. Alyssa stood off to the side, arms wrapped around herself as though physically cold. She wore a worn jacket and looked paler than I'd ever seen her. The confidence, the smugness that once accompanied her into that mansion, seemed stripped away. There was no sign of suitcases or fancy clothes, just a single duffel bag at her feet. I ushered the kids into the car, eager to get them out of the night's chill. They obediently climbed into the back seat. Then I turned to Alyssa. "Where's all your stuff? Did Marcus toss everything?" My tone was sharper than I intended. She swallowed. "Some of it's still at the mansion, I think. I couldn't carry it all. He locked me out." Her voice cracked. "I tried to find a motel, but money's... I'm broke. I can't afford a place right now." The swirl of anger and pity warred inside me. She'd done this to herself, yet I couldn't help feeling a pang of sympathy. "You realize how irresponsible this was? Taking the kids to some man's house without a safety net?" She flinched. I know. I'm sorry, okay? I never thought he'd do this." He seemed so genuine at first. A snort escaped me. He was genuine enough until it suited him, apparently. Then, with a sigh, I motioned to the passenger door. "Get in. We'll figure something out. But the kids come first." She hesitated, as if bracing for further scolding. Then, shoulders sagging, she gathered the duffel bag and climbed into the passenger seat. The drive home was silent, broken only by Emily's sniffles. Liam stared out the window, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Meanwhile, I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, fighting a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that I had my kids back, fury at the upheaval they'd endured, and a grudging sense of responsibility for Alyssa, who had nowhere else to turn. House of tension. When we arrived at the small house she once scorned as too cramped for her ambitions, I felt a stab of irony. Here I was, welcoming her back into the space she deemed insufficient. The kids trudged inside, taking in the familiar corners with a mix of relief and uncertainty. Emily, exhausted, plopped onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow. Liam hovered near the hallway, looking like he might vanish into his old bedroom any second. Alyssa stood by the door, arms wrapped around herself. The tension between us was palpable, a silent battle of pride and regret. I nodded at the kids. "You two must be hungry. Let's see if we can scrape something together in the kitchen, yeah?" I forced a gentle tone, wanting to ease their discomfort. Liam shrugged again, mumbling, "Whatever." Emily just yawned and blinked, too tired to protest. Alyssa tried to follow me, but I turned, voice firm. "Stay here," I said. "I need a moment with them." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Maybe she recognized my rightful anger, or maybe she was too drained to argue. I guided the kids into the kitchen, rummaging the fridge for anything quick. Sandwich fixings, leftover pasta. As I set out plates, Liam finally looked at me, voice taut with frustration. "Dad, are we staying here now? For good?" I swallowed. "I hope so, buddy. At least until we figure out what's next. You know you're always welcome here, right?" He nodded, biting his lip. Emily sniffled, rubbing tired eyes. I want my old room, she murmured. I hate that mansion. It was too big and Mom was always with him. They never had time for me and Liam. A pang stabbed my chest. I'm sorry you went through that, sweetheart. Gently I stroked her hair. We'll sort things out. You can have your old room. Everything's still there. She nodded, managing a half smile. Then her gaze flicked to the living room. What about Mom? I sighed. We'll talk, but for now let's get you fed and in bed. You've had a long day. They ate quietly, exhaustion etched on their faces. I busied myself, forcing calm into every movement. Stay strong for them, I reminded myself. An awkward return. After I tucked the kids into their old beds, my heart twisting at the sight of them in pajamas that seemed a bit too small now, I returned to the living room to face Alyssa. She sat on the couch, face buried in her hands. When she heard me approach, she looked up, eyes brimming with tears. Thank you, she whispered, voice trembling. I know this is an impossible situation, but thank you for taking us in. I crossed my arms, standing a few feet away. I'm doing it for the kids, I said flatly. As for you, I'm not going to toss you on the street. But let's be clear, you made a choice that hurt all of us. This is just a stopgap until you figure out your next move. Her eyes flickered with shame. I know. I regret it. She paused, glancing around the familiar walls she once deemed too humble. I was so blinded by his promises. He said he'd give me the world, that the kids would have the best opportunities. I believed him. I forced my voice to remain even. Did you ever consider the possibility that wealth and love aren't the same thing? That maybe you could have had happiness here with me and the kids, if you'd only worked through your issues instead of running off? She grimaced, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need time to get back on my feet. I can stay out of your way if that helps. A swirl of conflicting emotions tore at me. Part of me wanted to fling accusations, to make her feel the heartbreak I'd felt. Another part was just exhausted, longing to find some measure of peace for the children's sake. Fine, I finally said. For the kids' sake, you can stay in the guest room. But this is temporary. And I won't let you turn this house into a battlefield of arguments or guilt trips. Understand? She nodded meekly. Yes, I promise. I'll start looking for a job tomorrow. I'll pay you back for the groceries, for everything, once I can. A short laugh escaped me, bitter as dregs in a coffee pot. You do that? Without waiting for her response, I headed to my bedroom, shutting the door behind me. My heart thumped with tension. She's back under the same roof, but the rift between us is massive. I didn't know if I'd ever want her truly in my life again, but the kids needed stability. For now, that was enough reason to endure this uneasy arrangement. A new kind of family. Over the next few days, we settled into a fragile routine. The kids returned to their usual school, relieved to slip back into familiar rhythms. Alyssa spent hours on the phone, calling prospective employers, scanning listings online for an apartment. Every now and then, I caught her gazing at me with sorrow in her eyes, as if searching for some sign of forgiveness. I kept my distance, nodding cordially if we passed in the hallway, occasionally coordinating schedules for the kids. But the emotional wall between us remained. I refused to let her waltz back into my heart just because her grand plan imploded. Oddly enough, the kids adapted faster than I expected. Emily seemed content to have her old bedroom, her stuffed animals, and a stable environment again. Liam opened up about how he never liked Marcus, how the man barely acknowledged him unless it was to show off some fancy toy or brag about success. Hearing my son's resentment made me burn with quiet anger. How dare that man treat my kids like ornaments in his lavish lifestyle? One afternoon, I came home from school to find Alyssa in the kitchen, cooking a simple dinner. The aroma of sautéed onions and garlic filled the air, reminding me of earlier days when we'd cook together while the kids laughed in the living room. My chest tightened with nostalgia. She looked up, offering a tentative smile. I'm making spaghetti. Hope that's all right. I swallowed, forcing a polite nod. Sure. Thanks. I set my keys on the table, unsure how to navigate this domestic scene. She looked so different from the glamorous image she tried to maintain in Marcus's orbit. No fancy clothes, no meticulously styled hair. Just a worn t-shirt and jeans, eyes still red from tears she thought I couldn't see. She busied herself with the sauce, stirring as steam fogged the kitchen window. Finally, she spoke quietly. We used to do this together, remember? Her voice was tinged with regret. I avoided her gaze, focusing on retrieving plates from the cupboard. Yeah, we did. Silence fell. Then my voice softened despite myself. Look, Alyssa, we can't pretend everything's normal. You hurt me and you hurt the kids too. But they need stability, so let's keep things calm, okay? She nodded vigorously, tears threatening to spill. Yes, I get it. And I'm sorry. Every day I wish I could undo my choices. She exhaled, a trembling sound. I know I don't deserve your pity, but… I'm not pitying you, I interrupted, feeling a prick of annoyance. I'm making sure our kids are safe. That's all. With that, I carried the plates to the small dining table, heart pounding with the remnants of unspoken tension. A doorway to understanding. Slowly, a fragile acceptance took hold in the household. Alyssa found a part-time job at a local boutique, enough to save for a deposit on a tiny apartment. I continued teaching, took the kids to their after-school activities, and tried to keep life as normal as possible. The kids adjusted, though Liam remained wary of Alyssa's presence. He once asked me, "Dad, is Mom gonna leave again?" The question broke my heart, forcing me to reassure him that no matter what, I was here to stay. Occasionally, Alyssa and I had to discuss logistics, school events, budgets, the kids' emotional well-being. In those moments, I glimpsed a more humbled version of her, someone stripped of illusions and regretful of her mistakes. She confessed once, late at night when the kids were asleep, "I feel so ashamed. I thought chasing wealth would solve everything, but it only proved how lost I was." I listened in stony silence, arms folded. Part of me was relieved she recognized the damage she'd done. Another part still simmered with hurt. "I guess we all learn the hard way sometimes," I finally said, voice hoarse with unshed emotions. "But you chose to learn at the kids' expense?" She nodded, tears brimming. "I know. I'm sorry." Despite the turmoil, something unexpected happened. I realized I was no longer pinned under the weight of heartbreak. Her abrupt departure and flamboyant betrayal had once shattered me. But seeing her broken illusions, her remorse, allowed me to step out from the shadows of self-blame. No, I wasn't perfect, but I hadn't forced her to chase a dream that ended in ruin. She chose that path. And now, ironically, she was leaning on me for stability. Moving forward, apart. After a month, Alyssa managed to save enough for a small apartment across town. The day she announced she'd found a place was bittersweet. Emily cried, fearing that if Mom moved out again, she'd be gone for good. Liam just looked torn. I tried to explain that this time it would be different. There'd be regular visitation schedules, no abrupt vanishings. Alyssa chimed in, voice trembling with conviction. She promised not to uproot them again, assured them she'd be close enough to see them often. The kids nodded warily, uncertain but hopeful. On move-out day, we loaded her few belongings into a borrowed truck. The tension was still there, but overshadowed by a sense of closure. Before climbing into the driver's seat, she turned to me, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Tom, for everything. You had every right to turn me away." I took a steadying breath, acknowledging the swirl of complicated feelings within me. "I did it for the kids. You know that. But I also didn't want to see you truly homeless. No matter what happened between us, you're their mother. They deserve to have you around, stable." She blinked back, tears, nodding. "I won't forget your kindness." Then she hesitated, voice barely above a whisper. "One day maybe we can be friends again?" I looked away, uncertain. "I don't know about that. Let's just focus on co-parenting for now, okay?" She swallowed. "Okay," she agreed, climbing into the truck. "Thanks again." "I'm sorry." With that, she drove off into the early evening, leaving me standing on the curb with a strange mix of relief and sadness. When I re-entered the house, the kids were sprawled on the couch, eyes anxious. "Mom left?" Liam asked. "Yeah," I said, sinking next to them. "She's got her own place now, but you'll see her often." Emily nestled against me, a small hand clutching my arm. "You're not mad at her anymore?" I sighed. "I'm still hurt, sweetie, but I don't want to be mad forever. She's your mom and we both love you." They nodded, drawing close. In that moment, I realized that despite everything, we'd found a fragile new normal. Separate households, shared responsibilities, a second chance at stability. It wasn't the life I dreamed of, but it was honest. No illusions, no empty mansions promising false happiness. Just me, my kids, and the hope that, with time, they'd heal from the upheaval, and so would I. In the weeks that followed, Alyssa and I navigated co-parenting carefully. We agreed on a schedule that let the kids alternate weekends, spend holidays together in a cordial, if awkward, truce, and texted updates about school events. She found a better job eventually, started pulling herself up from the wreckage of her impulsive choices. We weren't friends, not exactly, but the open hostility had faded into something more tolerable. Mutual respect for our children's sake. Every so often, Emily and Liam mentioned how big and fancy the mansion was, but also how lonely it felt, how Marcus rarely paid attention to them. Their recollections reinforced the lesson that bigger isn't always better. A stable, loving environment, even in a modest home, held more warmth than all the marble floors and chandeliers in the world. As for me, I threw myself into my teaching, channeling my experiences into empathy for students who faced their own family struggles. My colleagues noticed a change, maybe a certain gravity in my outlook, but also a newfound sense of calm. Pain, after all, can shape us in unexpected ways. I wasn't naive anymore. I understood that love can be tested, broken, and sometimes, eventually reassembled into a new shape. Not the same as before, but perhaps, with enough honesty, a shape that still holds value. One Saturday morning, as I prepared breakfast for the kids, Liam asked, "Dad, do you still love Mom?" The question caught me off guard. After a brief pause, I answered gently, "I'll always care about her because she's your mother. But it's a different kind of love now, like concern for someone who was once close. We can't go back to being married, but we can be decent to each other." Emily, stirring her bowl of cereal, seemed to ponder that. "That's okay," she concluded. "As long as we still have you, Mom. Even if we're not all together." My chest tightened with a bittersweet ache. "Exactly," I said, ruffling her hair. "We're still a family in our own way." The journey hadn't been easy, but I realized that if homelessness could humble Alyssa, perhaps heartbreak had tempered me too. The kids were safe, we had a routine, and as the days rolled on, we found reasons to laugh again. Silly jokes, quiet moments reading together, celebrating small wins like Liam passing a math test or Emily's art project displayed at school. And so, life continued, quietly rebuilding from the shards Alyssa's ambitions had shattered. She'd taken the kids to chase a dream of wealth in a grand mansion, only to discover such illusions are often fleeting. But in the end she returned, homeless and humbled, to the place she once scorned, and I found the strength to help her stand for the sake of our children. Maybe that was all the closure we needed. A reminder that love and loyalty can't be purchased, that sometimes the simplest home is the warmest, and that even the darkest chapters can yield a fragile sort of hope if we let compassion temper our anger. In the hush of our little home, the kids' laughter was all the proof I needed that we were, at last, on a path to healing. One day, one step, one shared moment at a time.